And joining us right now to just decode this and what is Trump thinking, what is the Pentagon thinking, is someone very, very important. I want to introduce to you Michael Rubin, who's in fact, remember, a former Pentagon official. He's also a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Michael, thank you so much for your time. It's a big day. It's a story developing very fast and in real time. And people want to know, Rubin, whether Trump, his many flip-flops, is also responsible for what's going on. Is Trump really the peacemaker here, as he wants us to believe, or he's someone lighting the match?
Well, Donald Trump, first of all, didn't say he would wait 2 weeks. He would say he would wait up to 2 weeks. And so in reality, an American response could come at any time. I think Donald Trump is serious about giving Iran an off-ramp, a time to accept diplomacy. But he's also serious saying the nuclear program will end. I don't think Donald Trump is lighting the match at this point. I think he's basically saying this conflict has a time limit on it. It's going to end, and it's not going to end in Iran's favor.
Okay, you say this is not going to end in Iran's favor, and clearly that's a signal that America has been giving, Michael. But tell me something, regime change and an assassination, this is what you've heard from America, maybe in whispers, and this is also what you've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu for the last very many days. Now, is this posturing, or this could be a real scenario, Michael?
I think increasingly this is a real possibility. There were two missions for Israel. First was getting rid of Iran's nuclear program. To succeed in that, it demands taking out Fordo, the underground nuclear facility. Israel might need America's help on that. The other issue, and we've seen this with the targeting of the National Police Headquarters, of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Surveillance Center, is eliminating all the means of suppression which could prevent the Iranian people from rising up. And certainly, Netanyahu seems to be going in that direction, believing that it's not Iran with a nuclear weapon alone which is the threat, it's the specific regime he faces. He also worries that if the regime is allowed to survive, the Chinese, the Russians, the Pakistanis, maybe the Turks, would help Iran reconstitute its program. So there's a belief that not only the program needs to go, but the regime itself.
All right, you mentioned that important point, and I think our viewers would be interested to also know that how far can you see America going? How far will Israel go? And what about Iran? And are we underestimating Iran, Michael? These are important points that I'm going to just discuss with you in a moment, and I'm requesting you to please stay with us as we will also move forward now to look at Fordo. Now, this, remember, again, is one of the nuke sites. And in the conversations, you must have heard this, that in case you want to ensure that Iran is hit, you have to hit at Fordo. But how do you do this? It's a nuclear site. It is penetrated deep inside the ground. So let's bring up those graphics and the animation to help you understand how this can be done. Now, you look at this machine. It's a huge machine. This only belongs to the US. It's called the B-2 stealth bomber. It is a bomber. It's called the B-2 stealth bomber, a huge machine. Look at the entire design. And this only and only is what the US has, the United States of America. You need this in case you need to hit at Fordo. But what is special about this? Now, this is America's deadliest bomber. One of the most powerful machines that it has. What it can do, we will keep changing this to get you more updates on this. Now, there is a reduced radar signature again there to ensure that it is not captured in the enemy's radar. Because remember, if the enemy's radars are able to capture this, it can be shot down. And that is the reason why it has a lot of modifications on its body. How will it move? Now, this is the GBU-5 bomb that, again, we have discussed here on Newsnight. You will see the stealth bomber that is configured strongly enough for you to ensure that this drops from here. And this is when it drops this particular warhead. And this is the bunker buster bomb that we are speaking about. This is called the GBU-57. This is carried in the stealth bomber, and then it begins to move. It is a precision-guided bunker buster bomb, the only thing that can go deep inside bunkers, bunkers that are fortified bunkers right now, that are there in Iran and in Israel, also for safety purposes, also for their nukes. The weight of this, if you're wondering, it's a huge machine. The weight is close to about 30,000 pounds. That is the kind of material, the weight it really carries. The length of this is about 20 feet long. This is the GBU that can, again, to drop this, to carry this, you need the US's B-52 stealth bomber only. This is the only machine that is configured with this. And if you look at the entire width of this, close to about 31.5 inches. And we realize that there is a lot of interest to understand how these machines work. So here it moves, and it will drop this from here. It changes its position, and it is made from a high-performance steel alloy. And that is how it is able to sustain a lot of this weight, a lot of this pressure, a lot of this thrust. And this is where it begins to penetrate deep inside the ground. When it goes here, this is the bunker. It penetrates up to 200 feet. Think about this, how deep it can go. 200 feet, that is about 61 meters of reinforced concrete. And then is where you not just have a bunker. The thing is that even the Fordo nuclear site is deep inside. It is buried deep. And this is why you need this to be able to destroy those bunkers, those tunnels that today fortify a lot of sites, particularly the nuke sites in Iran. Is this going to be used or not? We do not know. But like I said, it is only the United States of America that has this. And more interesting details about this GBU-5 is that there is a GPS, there is an inertial navigation system, all that helps you to track this machine in real time. Something that America is capable of doing. But can it really do this? We do not know, but I'll tell you two more important details. It can carry more than 2,267 kilograms of explosives. The numbers are huge, they are staggering. And the cost of the bomb is, remember, approximately about 29 crores. 29 crores is the cost of this. Will we see America using this? We do not know, but I want to go back to Michael with this particular question. Michael, we've just talked about the cluster bombs. We've spoken about what's been happening as far as the Ayatollah regime is concerned. Is there going to be a regime change and much more? You think that is a possibility? And what is this conversation about the cluster bombs that Iran has essentially used against Israel?
Well, your question is right on. You're absolutely right. But there have been successful regime change before. We've seen this after World War II with Germany and Japan. We saw this when the Khmer Rouge was ousted by Vietnam in 1979, and we saw this with the ouster of Idi Amin in Uganda as well. The question is whether Iran maintaining a nuclear capability is in the interests of the region and whether the regime itself is destabilizing. That said, you're not going to get a democracy in Iran right away. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has too many resources. And so the question is whether it's going to become a military dictatorship which can continue control, or whether it's going to be an ideological dictatorship, which might be a problem. When you have Khamenei saying, under no condition are we going to surrender, I don't take that into account. Because in 1988, Ayatollah Khomeini said, under no circumstances are we going to agree to a ceasefire with Iraq. It's off the table, don't even ask. Then on July 21st, 1988, he got on the radio and he said, it's like drinking from a chalice of poison, but I have no choice but to drink from this cup if I want the Islamic Republic to survive. Right now, Khamenei's got to be given a choice. Is the Islamic Republic going to survive, or is it going to give up its nuclear program? It can't have both.
All right, I think what you say, and because you're a former Pentagon official, this is significant because you think that this is actually possible. The other question that people have been asking, Michael, whether it's possible or not, is whether you can see a strike by the US on Fordo. Is that possible? Is that a reality? That can happen?
The short answer is yes, Fordo can be hit. The American B-2 bomber with a 30,000-pound conventional bunker buster bomb is what's able to do it. Israel doesn't have that capability. The United States does. The advantage here is that Fordo isn't located in a civilian area, and so you don't have to worry about collateral damage. What many Iranians, by the way, are pointing out now is by the regime's official statistics, perhaps 250 or 300 civilians have been killed in this strike. Now, the strike has gone on for a week. During the Woman Life Freedom movement, more than 1,000 people were killed by the Iranians. Same thing in 2019 with regard to the gas price hike protests. The fact of the matter is, many Iranians are pointing out that they're safer with the Israelis bombing Iran than with the Iranian regime itself trying to reestablish control.
Okay, so you believe again that hitting Fordo could be a real possibility, and obviously that can be done with the stealth bomber and the GBU-57 that we just spoke about, Michael. Again, I'm going to be requesting you to stay with us as I move on to tell our viewers the next bit of the story. And this is also about the weapons. Remember the weapons, the artillery, the machines, the carriers, the big machines that the US has that has been already set into motion. And this is again something that gives you an idea of war preparedness. On our screens now are those details that will come one by one. We'll talk about all these machines. This is the F-22 Raptor Stealth Air Superiority Fighter. Now this is when Donald Trump decides to pull the trigger, and these are US weapons that can be used against Iran, and he can obviously say that you must start moving this towards Europe so that it becomes closer to where we need to strike. The other important machine is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. If you look at them, again, these are all very, very powerful machines with configurations that can hold enough number of personnel, enough number of weapons, they can strike at will. Let's bring up the next important detail also on the aircraft. This is the FA-18 Super Hornet. Again, very important details, interesting ones, but all these are already on the move as we speak. Something that gives an indication of a lot of movement already happening in case it comes to that. The other important aircraft that possibly could also be moved is the F-15 Strike Eagle. All of them come with different precision where you need to strike particular targets, and they are all, remember, under the radar, all have GPS monitors and a lot of other things. They're able to pick up a lot of imagery and strike at targets identified. This brings us to our next important detail again. This is about missiles and drones. So we showed you aircraft. Now we'll go down to missiles and drones. This is the Tomahawk Land Attack Cruise Missile. Missiles, again, very powerful. They're able to hit and they're able to be fired from a longer distance. Many, many kilometers is what could be used. And do remember all these drones. This is the AGM-158 JASSM Stealth Cruise Missile. A lot of them are also parked in the many air bases that US has around Iran. A lot of those are functional bases that already have been in play for the last many, many years and could be used in terms of an eventuality. This brings us to our next important detail that you will see again on missiles and drones. This is the AGM-114 Hellfire missile. So multiple missiles, names are different, but all these are to be used again in extreme circumstances in case you have to provide power to Israel to fight this war against Iran. The other one interesting that we are talking about is the MQ-9 Reaper drone. This again is a combination of a lot of machines, as you see in the structure, which carries a drone. It's able to move quickly, and it also is able to hit the target pretty well, is what its record says. Now are the warships. Warships, because we've discussed what could happen as far as the skies are concerned. This is the USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier. If you look at these images, these are carriers because on top of them you can see a lot of these aircrafts parked. So this is how you will be able to move them. A lot of them also have refueling facilities for longer hauls and to be able to ensure that they continue to remain airborne. This is the very, very famous USS Nimitz aircraft carrier, a huge machine. It can have a lot of their personnel already on board. And again, if you notice in this image, you will see all these aircrafts, the refuelers parked on it, completely. This already has moved towards Europe, is something again that we know for a fact. The US has not said why that movement has happened. This is the Ticonderoga class guided missile cruiser. Again, this is something that also houses a lot of missiles. Apart from your helicopters, apart from a lot of other equipment that you might need during war times. And Iran, remember, like I said, you have US that has constructed a lot of these bases, the Navy fleet that it already has in particular countries. Now, this is a warship. This is the Virginia-class attack submarine. Again, if Donald Trump decides to pull the trigger, this could already be on the move, and the enemy might not even know that this is coming to attack them. Even as we bring to you this broadcast, we have another quick breaking update right now, and that's going to be flashing on your screens. And this is about more action, more details that we are looking at right now. And what we can tell you is that the Hezbollah commander, apparently responsible for the rocket attacks on northern Israel, has been killed in Lebanon drone strike. This is what the IDF now has said. I'll repeat that again. The Hezbollah commander responsible for the rocket attacks on northern Israel has been neutralized in Lebanon drone strike, is what the IDF says. So a lot of action that is still happening as we speak. You're looking at Israel that already, remember, has eliminated a lot of key commanders. When it comes to Iran and its proxies, Hezbollah is one of its proxies, much like the Houthis. And you're looking at a lot of that action again happening right now. This is the latest breaking update on your screens. And Israel believes that he was someone responsible for the attacks. He was identified, he was tracked for the last few hours. And then you have seen a precision strike that was carried out. And Israel now says we have been able to eliminate the Hezbollah commander there. So clearly a story that continues to escalate by the moment. And I want to see if we can go back to Michael as far as this story is concerned. And also later we'll get you details of the more other commanders from Iran that have been neutralized as far as the strikes are concerned. But Michael, we haven't yet spoken about Russia and China. Many people say that there is a clear and a hidden Russia and China hand also in this conflict. Will you concur?
Certainly, Russia has been helping the Islamic Republic of Iran, including with its nuclear program, for some time. Frankly, Pakistan has as well. One of the reasons why Iran's program was referred to the United Nations was because they weren't being clear with the activities of the late Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan. China, of course, has an interest because 44% of the fuel which goes out of the Strait of Hormuz ends up in China. And so China has an interest, but China tends to take a more even approach. Russia, despite its rhetoric, is occupied in Ukraine right now. There's a limit to what they can do.
Okay, and now I have to ask you one question about the US, its priorities, the hypocrisy, because on one side you have the US literally quoting Pakistan. You have Donald Trump sitting with Asim Munir, the same man who's responsible for the Pentagon attack. And India has been able to present enough and many, many evidences, Michael. At this point, can you trust a Donald Trump?
In this case, I don't think Donald Trump can be trusted. One of the problems I have with Donald Trump is that he seems to have this fascination with terrorists and terrorists wearing business suits. We've seen this with the Taliban. We've seen this with meeting Ahmed al-Shara, a former al-Qaeda leader who's now the interim president of Syria. Just because you say you're a reformed al-Qaeda doesn't mean you really are a reformed al-Qaeda. And let's face it, the only difference between Asim Munir and Osama bin Laden is one lived in a cave and the other one lives in a palace. Donald Trump seems to be trading the short-term desire to have some geography from which to work with to oust the Iranian nuclear program with the long-term danger of emboldening Pakistan. This is also where I think India has a role to play, because there is another important reason why Donald Trump might be trying to get Pakistan's buy-in. If Iran surrenders, we're going to need to extricate the nuclear material. There's a big question mark over who is going to do that.
Yes, Michael, I think you're right. There's still a lot of question mark over what is Donald Trump really thinking? What is he going to be doing? And when he says 2 weeks, and you also say that he says still about 2 weeks, so we'll have to find out what he's wanting to do in those 2 weeks, Michael. But just stay with me as we will expand this entire story now and help our viewers understand what could happen in these 2 weeks. When Donald Trump says, and the White House says 2 weeks, what could this entail? We'll bring up those details again on our screens. What can you expect in these 2 weeks of the deadline? Back channel diplomacy activates. US is expected to work via the UAE, Oman and Qatar. But should you be talking to Iran? We do not know, but clearly this tells you that there could be a push to having a conversation with Iran so that it signs that deal. Let's bring up the next important point on what to expect. There could be pressure on Israel to pause. Is this going to be pausing for the moment or for the long haul? We do not know. But Israel likely to hold off the intense attacks. So you could see some kind of lull as far as the escalation of the attacks is concerned. But could this be long term? We do not know. Brings us to our third important point. Iran may signal restraint. So it might pull back for the moment. It might signal restraint. And Tehran then may publicly tone down the rhetoric. But even then, it doesn't solve your problem. Brings us to our fourth important point on what possibly to expect. This is about the proxy groups under the watch. Remember the Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the many other proxies that you have Iran creating to encircle Israel. Now, US and Israel are closely tracking the Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Iraqi militias, only to find out what possibly could they entail. A lot of them, remember, right now are under a lot of stress because a lot of their commanders have also been killed and hit by Israel. What you could also expect is that military posturing could continue. The US naval forces will remain in the region. They will continue to watch the entire story. They will see that Iran stays in its limits, but again, for how long? Brings us to our next important point on what you could expect in these 2 weeks. The oil markets will remain volatile. Oil is an important concern. You have the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm going to tell you also about that graphically in just a moment. But any provocation could send prices surging, again something that no country would want right now because this clearly could stress their money bags. Brings us to our next important detail. This is Trump seeking a win. Now, knowing Donald Trump, this could happen. He could aim to claim credit for preventing a war. He, remember, continues to make a lot of those false, baseless claims of how he tried to have that ceasefire between India and Pakistan. So we shouldn't be surprised. The Prime Minister has called out his bluff, but he could still be wanting to seek a win when it comes to the situation between Israel and Iran. Brings us to our next important point. Trump, in fact, if he does all this, there is a large risk of a miscalculation because even one rogue strike could trigger an immediate retaliation. And this again is a risk, but will Donald Trump and the US take responsibility for this? This brings us to our final point, the final outcome. What could that be? If diplomacy works, there could be a temporary calm, but then still, what about the Iranian nuclear program? Something that has been discussed. Will that still continue? Will there be breaks on this? And can you still allow Iran to develop nukes? Important question. And I want to take this back to, again, Michael, who's back with us. Michael, we've discussed a lot of important points. We've spoken about Russia, China, India. Is the US also with Israel? Because we do not know. Is the US and Donald Trump only about their self-interest?
The U.S. today is standing with Israel. Now, there is debate in Washington, but it seems that Donald Trump has decided that the isolationist base is going to be cast aside and that he's going to side with Israel. And this makes sense because even if some of the isolationist fringe and Donald Trump's base is angry at Israel for having initiated this conflict, a cold, naked calculation about what's in America's interest, chiding Israel or eliminating Iran's nuclear program once and for all. It's an obvious answer. Eliminate Iran's nuclear program.
But tell me something, Michael, why is the US not acting? Why is Donald Trump again quiet? You know, many would say that, is the US scared only because of Russia and China and, you know, the other allies right now of Iran? Why has the US not gone in and just ensured that there is a ceasefire?
Well, first of all, the United States might be putting some assets in place in order to conduct this operation. That takes time. Number two, the United States is scared about a vacuum developing. This is the reason why Donald Trump doesn't want the Israelis assassinating Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. What the United States wants is for Ali Khamenei to be forced to sign a surrender. When Khomeini did this in the 1988 Iran-Iraq War, he likened it to drinking from a chalice of poison. But if you have Khomeini actually physically surrendering, then you have the ability to sign off control to some other transitional council and prevent a vacuum from developing.
Okay, so clearly you see a game plan, and that is why maybe Donald Trump has bought this time, is what you think. But let's open this up to tell our viewers more details about why is the US possibly worried. Now, what could be the reasons? We are looking at a lot of oil fields. Oil is a lot of money. Oil is a lot of transaction. And oil obviously is something that is at the nerve also of this conversation. So we bring up a map for you to help you understand that why possibly there could be a threat to the Iranian oil fields. These are the possible effects on the trade routes in case you will see an escalation and in case you will see some bit of action also by the US. Now, this is the Suez Canal, which is the choke point. What is at risk if this gets affected or this gets blocked? About 4.2 million barrels of oil that travels from here per day. Now, this is a Strait of Hormuz. You must have heard about this. In case there is an escalation, this is also what Iran could actually choke. It could get closed. Why is this important? Again, because it's about 17.9 million barrels per day. 17.9 million barrels is what really moves from this. And then you also have the Bab al-Mandab. This is on the other southern end here. The choke point, the risk here is that from here you have about 3.2 million barrels that move essentially per day. And clearly, you have a larger story at hand. You have a lot more countries that will get affected as far as the threat to the Iranian oil fields is concerned. And not just this, the US itself has a lot of interest, as we just heard Michael speaking about. And we'll also look very closely at the Strait of Hormuz, because this is something which possibly will also affect India. Now, where is the Strait of Hormuz? You're looking at the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And all these quick carriers that you see moving are those that carry a lot of trade, a lot of bulk, a lot of oil. What happens in case this particular portion gets shut is that clearly they will not just be stranded here, they will have to look for alternate routes, which are very difficult and which might be difficult, also keeping in mind the money involved, the time that could be lost, and a lot of other expenditure. And Iran, will it go on to closing the Strait of Hormuz? No one knows. But this is again a possibility that not just the world, but New Delhi is also looking at very closely. At this point, I want to go back to Michael, and we will in fact take this point ahead also now with him. As you're looking at US with Israel and a lot of other things, Michael, that you have spoken about, but when we began the show, we also discussed about cluster bombs, we discussed about the Iron Dome, and there is a concern that the Iron Dome possibly is also under a lot of pressure. It could be leaking.
Well, first of all, yes, Israel did start to run short on missiles. And what Israel also does is it calculates where different missiles are going to land. If it's going to land in a rural area or in an empty field, they're not going to bother intercepting it. They're going to save their munitions. The United States has now resupplied Israel with many of these interceptors. At the same time, Iran is also running out of missiles. The first barrages that Iran sent on day 1 and 2 of this conflict had between 120 and 150 missiles in each of them. Now the Iranian barrages are down to between 10 and 20 missiles. That's a reflection that Iran is running out of ammunition as well.
Okay, and Michael, before I let you go, this is my final question. As you look at the entire story developing, entire escalation going on, which is the most likely outcome? What could happen?
I think within a week, Fordo is going to be bombed. I do believe that the regime in Iran is going to collapse. Now, while the collapse of the regime will represent a failure of diplomacy, the war represents a failure of diplomacy. At the same time, it opens new opportunities. After Kuwait was liberated and Saddam Hussein was defeated in 1991, that opened the Madrid conference in which the Israelis, the Syrians, and the Palestinians sat together for the first time. Could we see, and that led to the Oslo Accords 2 years later. Could we see, with the Iranian government collapsing, with the Islamic Republic collapsing, the opportunity for a Cyrus Accords to join the Abraham Accords? I think that's a real possibility, because while the regime is anti-Israel in Iran, the Iranian people are not. And therefore, there is a host of new opportunities. I am worried about what comes next. And in this case, I worry about an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps dictatorship. But not everyone in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is a theocrat or an ideologue. Some of them simply want to maintain control. Some of them are nationalists. And this is also where India can help identifying who might be the person to take charge.